Bennett Cross stared at his phone screen, the glow harsh against his face in the dimly lit hotel suite. Wife. 21 missed calls. Behind him, Taryn Wolfe stretched across the bed like a satisfied cat, her laugh still echoing from 20 minutes ago when she'd answered his phone. When she'd purred into the receiver, "He's busy right now. Can I take a message?" The click of Isabel hanging up had been soft. Final. "Is she still blowing up your phone?" Taryn called out, amusement threading through her voice. Bennett's thumb hovered over the callback button. 21 times. Isabel had called 21 times. His wife, the woman who barely spoke above a whisper at family dinners, who faded into expensive wallpaper at his business meetings, who nodded and smiled and never ever made demands, had called 21 times. The phone didn't ring again. That silence hit him like a fist to the gut. Before we go deeper into the story, you are welcome to Empire Stories. We're building a community that refuses to accept neglect and betrayal as normal. If you believe women deserve respect, loyalty, and real love, not control disguised as protection, subscribe and help us get to 10,000 subscribers. Your support helps us spread these stories to people who need to know. They deserve better, and it's okay to walk away. Bennett. Taryn sat up now, wrapping the sheet around herself. Come back to bed. She'll get over it. They always do. But Bennett couldn't move, couldn't look away from that call log. Isabel didn't do desperate, didn't do messy. In 8 years of marriage, she'd never once called him twice in a row, let alone 21 times. She simply existed in the background of his empire, managing his social calendar, hosting his associates, remembering which judge preferred bourbon and which senator had a shellfish allergy. The 22nd call never came. His fingers moved on instinct, hitting her contact. The line didn't even ring, straight to a dead tone that made his blood run cold. "I need to go." "What?" Taryn's face twisted with disbelief. "You're leaving? Now? Because your wife is having a tantrum." Bennett was already grabbing his jacket, his keys. The 15-minute drive to the Montclair estate felt like 15 hours. He white-knuckled the steering wheel, telling himself this was nothing. Isabel was probably asleep. She turned off her phone. She was making a point. Except Isabel didn't make points. She made the empire run. The mansion was dark when he pulled through the gates. Not unusual, it was past midnight. But something felt wrong. The air tasted wrong. He pushed through the front door. Isabel. Silence. The kind of silence that wasn't just absence of sound. It was absence of presence. He took the stairs 3 at a time, his heart hammering against his ribs in a way that had nothing to do with exertion and everything to do with the way his body already knew what his mind refused to accept. Their bedroom looked untouched. Bed made with military precision. But when he yanked open her closet, empty. Not half empty. Not missing a few things, empty. Completely, methodically, surgically empty. Even the hangers were gone. Bennett spun toward his private safe, the one hidden behind the Rothko in his office down the hall. His fingers fumbled the combination twice before it clicked open. The cash was still there. The backup passports. The unregistered Glock. But the small black ledger, the one that contained nothing except phone numbers and account codes written in Isabel's careful handwriting, was gone. So was the biometric scanner she'd set up last year, the one she'd said would streamline access to the offshore accounts. His phone buzzed. A text from his account manager in the Caymans. Authentication failed. Access denied. Required credentials. Primary plus secondary biometric verification. Another text, this one from his lawyer. Judge Reeves won't return my calls. Says the quarterly consultation fee wasn't received. What's going on? Then his capo, Danny Rizzo. Boss, the Russos are sniffing around our shipment routes. You want me to reach out to our guy at the Port Authority? I don't have his contact. Bennett looked at the empty safe, at the missing ledger, at the ghost of his wife's presence in this hollow mansion. Isabel hadn't left in a rage. She hadn't fled in tears. She'd extracted herself with the precision of a surgeon removing a tumor. and she'd taken the skeleton key to his entire empire with her. His phone rang. Unknown number. He answered without thinking. "Hello, Bennett." Isabel's voice was soft, calm, the same tone she used when asking if he wanted cream in his coffee. "I imagine you've noticed I'm gone." "Isabel, I called you 21 times," she continued, as if he hadn't spoken. "Did you know that? 21 attempts to reach my husband, to give you a chance to choose differently, to come home, to explain, to care. Where are you?" His voice came out rougher than intended. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" "I'm doing what I should have done years ago. I'm leaving. You can't just—" He stopped himself, forced his breathing to steady. "Isabel, baby, whatever Taryn said, she didn't mean. This isn't about what she said, Bennett. This is about what you did, what you've been doing, and what I've been enabling." A pause. "Did you know I've spent the last 3 years building your empire? Not you, me. Every political connection, every offshore account, every piece of leverage you have on every dirty cop and corrupt judge from here to Atlantic City. I cultivated that. I maintained that. I was that." Bennett's mind was racing. "The accounts require my biometric authentication and a verbal passcode that only I know." "Yes." He could hear the smile in her voice now. It made his skin crawl. "You never paid attention to the details, did you? You were too busy playing king while I built the castle brick by brick." "Isabel, listen to me." "No. You listen. For once." Her voice sharpened, just a fraction. Still controlled. Still terrifying. "I gave you 21 chances tonight. 21 opportunities to prove I mattered more than whatever was between your mistress's legs. You ignored every single one. So now I'm giving you a choice. You can try to find me. Hunt me. Send your men after me like I'm some kind of escaped asset. Or what? Or you can confess to the Kellerman murder. The one from 2019. Give yourself up to the FBI. And maybe, I'll consider unlocking just enough of your accounts for you to afford a decent lawyer." Bennett's blood turned to ice. "You're bluffing." "Am I? Check your Cayman account in 20 minutes. You'll find I've already moved $30 million to a charitable trust. For battered women, specifically." I thought the irony was appropriate. The line went dead. Bennett stood in his empty mansion, surrounded by the architecture of his power, and felt it all crumbling. Because somewhere out there in the darkness, his invisible wife, the woman he'd overlooked, underestimated, and betrayed, had just declared war. And she'd fired the first shot before he'd even realized they were on a battlefield. His phone buzzed again. Another text from Danny. "Boss, we got a problem. The blackmail server is locked. We can't access any of the files on the politicians. What do I do?" Bennett looked at the 21 missed calls on his screen. 21 warnings he'd ignored. The silence that followed them would destroy him. Bennett didn't sleep. He spent the hours before dawn tearing through the estate like a man possessed, checking every room, every drawer, every corner where Isabel might have left something. A note, a clue, a mistake. Nothing. She'd been thorough, surgical. The medicine cabinet in her bathroom, empty. The jewelry box on her vanity, gone, except for the diamond tennis bracelet he'd given her last Christmas. Left behind like a returned receipt. Even her toothbrush had vanished. By sunrise, Bennett stood in his office, phone pressed to his ear, listening to his account manager in the Cayman stammer through another failed login attempt. "Mr. Cross, I'm telling you, the system won't accept any credentials without the secondary biometric scan. Mrs. Cross set up a dual authentication protocol last year. She said it was for security purposes, and you approved." "I don't care what I approved," Bennett snarled. "Override it." "Sir, that's not possible. The encryption she implemented requires both thumbprints, yours and hers, plus a 16-digit verbal passcode that only she has. Without her physical presence or that code, The system treats any access attempt as a breach and locks down tighter. Bennett ended the call and hurled his phone across the room. It shattered against the Rothko, leaving a dent in the canvas worth more than most people's houses. The law of dependency, that's what his father used to call it. Make yourself indispensable. Make them need you so badly that removing you would collapse the entire structure. Bennett had spent his whole life applying that principle to judges, politicians, cops. He'd never realized his own wife had been applying it to him. Have you ever trusted someone so completely that you didn't notice them holding all the keys? His phone, the backup one in his desk drawer, buzzed. Danny Rizzo. Boss, we got a situation. The Russos just hit our card game on Market Street. Walked right in like they owned the place. Took 40 grand and hospitalized 2 of our guys. Bennett's jaw clenched. And where the hell was our protection? We pay Captain Hendricks a fortune to look the other way on Market Street. That's the thing, boss. Hendricks says he never got this month's payment. Says his contact, some woman who usually handles it, never showed up. He's threatening to pull all our protections citywide if we don't make it right by Friday. The woman, Isabel. She'd handled all the cash deliveries to the dirty cops. Always discreet. Always punctual. Always forgettable in her designer coats and quiet smile. Bennett had never even bothered to learn the routes she took or the protocols she'd established. Handle it, Bennett said through gritted teeth. Pay Hendricks double. Whatever it takes. With what money, boss? The accounts are frozen. Bennett hung up. His empire, the thing he'd built through blood and intimidation and calculated violence, was crumbling. Not from a rival's attack or a federal investigation, but from the quiet absence of a woman he'd stopped seeing years ago. Taryn appeared in the doorway, wearing one of his shirts, her hair tousled from sleep. Baby, come back to bed. You've been up all night. Isabel will come crawling back once she realizes she has nowhere to go. Bennett looked at her, really looked at her, and felt a wave of contempt so strong it tasted like copper. Taryn was beautiful, yes, exciting, but she couldn't name a single judge on his payroll, couldn't recite a single offshore account number, couldn't navigate the intricate web of favors and threats and carefully maintained relationships that kept the Cross family untouchable. Isabel could recite them all from memory. Get out, Bennett said quietly. What? I said get out. Go home. We're done. Taryn's face twisted with shock, then fury. You're dumping me? For her? She left you. Bennett, she walked out. And she took everything that matters with her. He turned away from Taryn, looking out over the manicured grounds of his estate, the fortress he'd built to prove he was untouchable. You were right about one thing. She did go somewhere. She went somewhere I can't reach. And she made damn sure I'd feel it. The house felt hollow. Not empty. It was still full of expensive furniture and priceless art and the trappings of power. But hollow, like a shell with nothing living inside. Isabel hadn't just left him. She'd revealed that he'd been living in a house of cards, and she'd been the one holding it all together. If you're hooked on how Bennett's entire empire is collapsing, hit subscribe, we're just getting started. Bennett pulled up his contacts list, scrolling to his most trusted capo, the one man who'd been with him since the beginning. He needed to find Isabel. He needed to make her understand that walking away wasn't an option. But as his thumb hovered over the call button, a text came through from an unknown number. A photo. Isabel, sitting in what looked like a cafe, espresso in hand, sunlight streaming through the window. She looked peaceful, radiant even, and beneath the photo, a single line of text. Stop looking. You won't find me until I want to be found. And by then, you won't have anything left to bargain with. Bennett stared at the message until his vision blurred. The woman in that photo wasn't the Isabel he knew. Wasn't the quiet, subservient wife who'd faded into the background of his life. This Isabel was awake. And she was dangerous. Taryn didn't leave. Despite Bennett's order, despite the ice in his voice, she stayed. She spent the next 3 days trying to prove she could fill the void Isabel left behind, and every attempt made Bennett want to put his fist through a wall. On Tuesday morning, she brought him coffee in his office, black, no sugar. Isabel had always made it with 2 sugars and a splash of cream, the way he actually liked it but never admitted to anyone except her. "I thought you might need this," Taryn said, perching on the edge of his desk in a silk robe that barely covered anything. "You've been so stressed." Bennett took one sip and set it down. "I have a meeting with Judge Calabrese at noon. I need the file on his son's DUI case. The one we made disappear last year." Taryn blinked. "I don't know where Isabel kept those things." "They're in the filing cabinet. 3rd drawer. Under C." She returned 20 minutes later empty-handed, mascara smudged with frustration. "Bennett, there are like 1,000 files in there and none of them make sense. They're all labeled with numbers and letters, not names. Because Isabel had created a coding system. A17 meant judges. B23 meant politicians. C09 meant cops. Bennett hadn't needed to know the system because Isabel had always known it for him. "Forget it," he muttered. "I'll handle it myself." But he couldn't handle it. The meeting with Calabrese went sideways the moment the judge realized Bennett had come unprepared, without the usual leverage or the customary envelope of cash that Isabel always delivered exactly 1 week before any negotiation. Calabrese had walked out after 15 minutes, leaving Bennett sitting alone in a booth at Russo's Italian, feeling like an amateur. That afternoon, Mrs. Serena called, the wife of his weapons supplier. It was her birthday, apparently. Isabel had always sent flowers, champagne, and a handwritten note in Mandarin that Bennett couldn't read, but that always made Mrs. Serena smile and keep her husband's prices favorable. Taryn answered the phone. "Hello? Oh, hi. Yes, Bennett's right here. What? A birthday? Hold on." She covered the receiver. "Some Chinese lady is asking about flowers? Should I just tell her you'll call back?" Bennett snatched the phone, apologizing in his clumsy Mandarin, promising the flowers were delayed, feeling the relationship crumbling in real time. Mrs. Serena's voice had gone cold by the end of the call. Next month, their weapons prices would double. He knew it. How many relationships in your life are held together by someone else's invisible work? By Wednesday evening, Danny Rizzo showed up at the estate with a problem that made Bennett want to scream. Senator Hughes was backing out of their protection deal for the dockworkers union. Said he never received his quarterly consultation fee, and was now threatening to launch an investigation into cross-family operations. "Where's the ledger?" Danny asked, pacing in Bennett's office. "The one with all the payment schedules? Isabel always had it updated. We need to know who else is about to flip." "It's gone. She took it." Danny stopped pacing. "All of it? The whole payment infrastructure? Every contact, every schedule, every blackmail file we had on every politician from here to Trenton." Bennett's voice was flat, dead. "It's all locked behind her biometric authentication. Jesus Christ, boss. She wasn't just your wife. She was the entire goddamn nervous system of this operation." Taryn appeared in the doorway with a tray of sandwiches she'd attempted to make, the bread cut unevenly, the ingredients falling out. "I thought you guys might be hungry. I made lunch." Danny stared at her like she'd just offered him poison. "We're in the middle of something," Bennett said through clenched teeth. "I'm just trying to help, baby. Maybe if you ate something you'd think clearer. You've been so distant lately. Get out." "Bennett. I said get out." Taryn fled, tears streaming down her face. Danny waited until her footsteps faded before speaking. "Boss, I'm gonna say something, and you're not gonna like it, but that girl, she's not built for this life. Isabel was." Isabel understood that being a mafia wife isn't about looking pretty and warming the bed. It's about keeping the machine running so quietly that nobody notices it's even there. Bennett said nothing. He was thinking about 8 years of Isabel moving through his world like a ghost, managing chaos he'd never even seen, solving problems before they reached his desk. He'd mistaken her silence for emptiness, her subtlety for weakness. He'd been so wrong it physically hurt. "Find her," Bennett said quietly. "I don't care what it costs. Find Isabel and bring her home." Danny nodded and left. Bennett sat alone in his office, surrounded by the ruins of an empire he'd thought he'd built alone. Taryn's uneven sandwiches sat untouched on the desk, a monument to everything Isabel had been that he'd failed to appreciate. Drop a comment. What's the worst mistake you've seen someone make in a relationship? The house felt hollow again. But now Bennett understood why. It wasn't that Isabel had taken things when she left. It was that she'd been holding everything together all along, and he'd never even noticed the weight she carried. The freeze happened on Thursday at 3:47 a.m. Bennett was awake, as usual, scrolling through offshore account statements on his laptop when every single balance simultaneously displayed the same message. Access denied. Security protocol activated. Biometric verification required. He tried his business account. Frozen. His emergency fund in Singapore. Frozen. The shell company accounts in Panama, the Caymans, Switzerland. All frozen. 8 years of carefully laundered money, over $200 million, locked behind a digital wall that Isabel had built brick by brick, while he'd been too busy playing kingpin to notice. Bennett called his account manager, then his lawyer, then his IT guy, a hacker he paid 6 figures a year to keep under retainer for exactly this kind of emergency. The hacker, a kid named Reed who looked like he'd never seen sunlight, showed up at dawn with 3 laptops and enough energy drinks to kill a horse. He worked for 6 hours straight, his fingers flying across keyboards, muttering about encryption protocols and blockchain security. Finally, he leaned back and rubbed his eyes. "Mr. Cross, whoever designed this system is a genius. And I don't say that lightly. This isn't just dual authentication. It's quantum-resistant encryption tied to biometric markers with algorithmic verification that randomizes every 72 hours. Even if I had her thumbprint, I'd need her voice saying the correct passcode at the correct time in the correct location. And the location changes. Can you break it or not?" Reed looked at him like he'd asked if he could fly to the moon. "Breaking this would take a team of NSA-level cryptographers about 6 months. Maybe. And that's if they knew what they were doing. Sir, your wife didn't just lock you out. She built a fortress that makes Fort Knox look like a piggy bank." Bennett paid Reed and sent him away. He sat in his office, staring at the screens full of frozen numbers, and felt something he hadn't felt since he was 15 years old, and his father had beaten him unconscious for stealing from the family store. Helplessness. By noon, Danny showed up with worse news. The blackmail vault, the digital server containing photos, recordings, and documents on every corrupt official in their network, had gone dark. "We can't access any of it, boss. Not the files on Senator Hughes. Not the photos of Judge Calabrese with that escort. Not the recordings of Captain Hendricks taking bribes. It's all behind the same encryption. Isabel set up the whole system 3 years ago. Said it was safer than keeping physical copies." Bennett's phone rang. A known number. He answered. "Good morning, Bennett." Isabel's voice was calm, almost pleasant, like she was calling to confirm a dinner reservation. "I assume you've noticed the accounts. You can't do this." "I already did. Did you know I spent 6 months learning cryptography? Took online courses under a fake name. MIT-level stuff. I wanted to make sure that when I left, you'd understand exactly how much you relied on me." "Isabel, this is insane. That money isn't just mine. It belongs to the family, to the business. People are depending on. People like Senator Hughes? The one who votes against healthcare for poor children while we pay him $200,000 a year? Or Judge Calabrese, who sends innocent men to prison while letting our dealers walk free?" Her voice hardened. "I kept your empire running, Bennett. I maintained relationships with monsters so you could sleep peacefully at night. And you repaid me by letting your mistress mock me on my own husband's phone. What do you want? I want you to feel what it's like to lose everything, to be powerless, to realize that the person you overlooked was the only reason you had power at all." She paused. Oh, and Bennett? The Russos know about the shipment coming in Friday night. Funny how information leaks when the person managing security protocols isn't there anymore. The line went dead. Bennett stood and walked to the window, looking out over his estate. 20 acres of manicured perfection. 4 luxury cars in the garage. A wine cellar worth $500,000. All of it suddenly felt like stage props in a play he hadn't realized was ending. Isabel hadn't been his wife. She'd been the architect, the engineer, the invisible hand that turned his violent ambitions into an actual empire. He'd been the face, the muscle, the loud, threatening presence in the room. But she'd been the mind. And without a mind, the body was just a corpse waiting to fall. If you're seeing how power really works, hit subscribe. Isabel's not done dismantling him yet. Bennett's phone buzzed again. Danny. Boss. The Russos just hit our warehouse in Newark. They knew exactly when our guys would be rotating shifts. We lost $500,000 in product. Bennett closed his eyes. Isabel had memorized every detail of his operation. Shift rotations, shipment schedules, weak points in their security. She'd been the keeper of institutional knowledge that couldn't be written down. And now she was weaponizing it. He was fighting a war against someone who knew every move before he made it. Someone who'd built the chessboard he was playing on. Bennett Cross, the most feared man in New Jersey, was discovering what it felt like to be checkmated by a ghost. The 22nd call came on Sunday night at exactly 11:47 p.m. Bennett had been drinking scotch in the dark, watching his empire crumble in real time through a series of increasingly desperate text messages from his crew. The Russos had taken 2 more shipments. Judge Calabrese had sided with the prosecution in a case that should have been a guaranteed acquittal. 3 of his best dealers had been arrested because the usual warning system, Isabel's carefully maintained relationship with a dispatcher at the precinct, had gone silent. When his phone lit up with unknown, he answered before the first ring finished. Isabel. Hello, Bennett. Her voice was steady, professional even, like she was calling about a business arrangement, which he supposed she was. I imagine you've had an interesting week. Interesting isn't the word I'd use. He kept his voice measured, controlled. Years of negotiating with people who'd kill him for showing weakness had trained him well. You've made your point. You were important. Essential, even. I get it. Now let's talk about how we fix this. Fix this. She laughed, soft and humorless. Bennett, you can't fix 8 years of disrespect with a conversation. But I'm willing to negotiate. There it was. The opening. Bennett sat forward, his mind already calculating angles. Everyone wanted something. Even Isabel. Especially Isabel. What do you want? Money? I can move assets once the accounts are unfrozen. You want the house? It's yours. A divorce settlement that would make you rich for life? Done. I don't want your money, Bennett. I helped steal it, remember? I know exactly how dirty it is. Then what? Silence. Long enough that Bennett thought the connection had dropped. Then Isabel spoke, and her voice carried a weight that made his blood run cold. The Kellerman murder. February 2019. I want you to confess to the FBI. Bennett's hand tightened around his glass. You're insane. Am I? Think about it. Marcus Kellerman was investigating your trafficking routes. You ordered the hit. Danny carried it out. They found his body in the Pine Barrens 3 days later with 2 bullets in the back of his head. The case went cold because I made sure Judge Reeves suppressed the cell tower evidence that would have placed Danny in the area. I protected you, Bennett, like I always did. If you know all that, then you know confessing is a death sentence. It's 15 to 20 years with a good lawyer. You'd be out in 12 with parole. That's leverage, Bennett. That's what you taught me. Everyone has something they're willing to trade when the alternative is worse. Have you ever realized too late that someone knew all your secrets? Bennett stood and paced to the window, scotch sloshing in his glass. And in exchange for me throwing away my life, you give me what? The account codes. Not all of them. Enough to keep your crew paid for 6 months. Enough to settle your debts with the Russos before they kill you. Enough to avoid dying broke and powerless in some gutter. But not enough to rebuild. Never enough to rebuild. That's not a negotiation, Isabel. That's extortion. No, Bennett. Extortion is what you did to Senator Hughes. What you did to Judge Calabrese. What you've done to dozens of people over the years with my help. Her voice softened, became almost gentle. This is accountability. This is you finally paying for Marcus Kellerman. For all the men like him who died because you wanted more power. Bennett's jaw clenched. I'm not confessing to murder. Then I hope you've enjoyed being a mafia boss, because in 3 weeks, the Russos will own your territory. In 6 weeks, your crew will scatter to other families. And in 3 months, you'll be dead or irrelevant. Your choice, really. There has to be another way. There isn't. See, that's the thing about leverage, Bennett. It only works when the other person has no alternatives. Right now, you have 2 choices: prison with money or death without it. I've structured this negotiation so that both outcomes serve my purpose. That's what you taught me. Always control the options. She was quoting him. His own words from a conversation 3 years ago when he'd been explaining to Danny how to extract money from a debtor. Isabel had been in the room, silent as always, serving coffee. He'd thought she wasn't even listening. She'd been listening to everything. I need time to think, Bennett said finally. You have 72 hours. After that, I move the remaining accessible funds to offshore accounts you'll never find, and I send everything I know about the Kellerman murder to the FBI anyway. At least if you confess, you get something out of it. If you don't, you get prison time and poverty. Isabel. And Bennett? Stop sending your men to look for me. I'm not hiding. I'm just somewhere you don't have the intelligence to find. Because the person who built your intelligence network is standing on the other side of this war. The line went dead for the 2nd time that week. Bennett hurled his glass against the wall, watching it explode into crystalline fragments that caught the moonlight like dying stars. Isabel had just given him a masterclass in negotiation. Control the alternatives, manufacture urgency, offer a choice that isn't really a choice at all. She'd learned from the best. Unfortunately for him, he'd been the teacher. Now the student was destroying him with his own lessons, and there wasn't a damn thing he could do about it except choose which way he wanted to lose. The Russos came for blood on Tuesday morning. Bennett was in the middle of a meeting with his remaining capos, 7 men who'd built their lives around the Cross Empire and were now watching it collapse in real time. When Danny burst through the door, blood streaming from a gash above his eyebrow. They hit the card game on Broad Street, took everything, shot Tommy Delacroix in the leg and told him to deliver a message. The Russos are claiming Market Street, Broad Street, and the waterfront by Friday. Anyone who resists ends up in the river. The room went silent. Market Street alone generated $40,000 a week. The waterfront controlled shipping access for half their operations. Losing that territory would cut the Cross family's income by 60%. How many men did they bring? Bennett asked, his voice dangerously quiet. 15. Maybe 20. They walked in like they owned the place, boss. Like they knew exactly when our protection would be lightest. Because they did know. Isabel had maintained the scheduling system which crews patrolled which territories when shifts changed where the vulnerabilities were. Bennett had never bothered to learn the details because Isabel had always managed it seamlessly. Now that system was a weapon being used against him. We hit them back, one of the capos said. Tonight. Hard. With what money? Another capo gestured at the empty table between them. Half the crew hasn't been paid in 2 weeks. The ones who are still showing up are doing it out of loyalty, but loyalty doesn't feed families. The Russos are offering double what we used to pay. How long before our guys start jumping ship? Bennett's phone buzzed. A text from his weapons supplier. Payment 3 weeks overdue. No more shipments until account settled. Mrs. Serena sends her regards. Mrs. Serena, the woman whose birthday Isabel never forgot, whose grandchildren Isabel asked about by name, who gave them favorable prices because Isabel had spent years building that relationship with thoughtful gestures and impeccable cultural awareness. Another text. The police dispatcher who used to warn them about raids. Can't help anymore. Your contact never showed up with payment. Good luck. Then another. Judge Reeves's clerk. The judge wanted me to inform you that he's reassigning all cross-family cases to other courts. He says the arrangement is terminated. Bennett watched his phone light up with the systematic destruction of every alliance Isabel had built. She wasn't just withholding information. She was actively dismantling the web of relationships that made his empire function. Boss, Danny said quietly, pulling Bennett aside while the other capos argued. We got another problem. 3 of our dealers got arrested last night. Normally, we'd have Judge Reeves bail them out by morning. But now, they're sitting in county lockup and they're talking about flipping. They know we don't have the juice to protect them anymore. How long before the feds get involved? They already are. I got a call from our contact at the FBI field office. Said they've received an anonymous tip about the Kellerman murder. They're reopening the case. Bennett felt something cold settle in his stomach. Isabel wasn't just attacking his empire. She was closing off every possible escape route, herding him toward the exact choice she'd given him. Confess or lose everything. By Wednesday afternoon, the Russos had claimed Market Street without firing a shot. Bennett's crew had simply abandoned their posts when they realized there was no money to pay them and no protection if they got arrested. That evening, Bennett stood on the balcony of his estate, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and red like the world was burning. His phone rang every few minutes with more bad news. A shipment seized by customs because the usual bribes hadn't been paid. A safe house raided because the tip-off network had gone silent. 2 more capos calling to say they were taking a step back until things stabilized. Things weren't going to stabilize. Isabel had designed this collapse with the precision of a controlled demolition. Danny appeared at the balcony door, looking like he'd aged 10 years in 10 days. Boss, we need to talk about exit strategies. The Russos aren't stopping at Market Street. They're coming for everything, and we don't have the resources to fight back. Without money, without protection, without the political connections. Without Isabel, Bennett finished quietly. Yeah, without Isabel. Danny leaned against the railing, staring out at the darkening sky. I've been in this life 20 years, boss. I've seen families rise and fall, but I've never seen one collapse this fast. It's like she pulled one thread and the whole thing unraveled. She didn't pull one thread. She was the thread. We just didn't realize the entire tapestry was held together by her hands. A text came through. Unknown number. Bennett didn't need to check to know it was Isabel. He opened it anyway. 52 hours remaining. The Russos are calling a sit-down for Friday to discuss terms for your surrender. I told them where to find you. Choose wisely, Bennett. Prison or death. At least in prison, you'll live long enough to regret what you lost. Bennett showed the message to Danny, who swore quietly and viciously. What are you gonna do, boss? Bennett looked at his estate, his cars, the empire he'd thought he built alone. All of it feeling like borrowed time, borrowed power, borrowed glory that had never really been his at all. I'm going to do what I should have done 10 years ago, Bennett said, his voice hollow. I'm going to pay attention to the woman I married. But even as he said it, he knew it was too late. Isabel wasn't coming back. She was watching from somewhere beyond his reach, waiting for him to break. And break he would. Because Bennett Cross had spent his entire life believing that power came from violence and fear. Isabel was teaching him that real power came from knowing which threads held everything together. And having the courage to cut them. The lead came Thursday morning from a private investigator Bennett had hired. A former FBI agent named Garrett who charged $5,000 a day and promised results. Found her, Garrett said over the phone, his voice crackling with static. Or at least found where she's been. Hotel in Atlantic City. The Ocean View Grand. Front desk clerk remembers a woman matching her description checked in 3 days ago under the name Sarah Mitchell. Paid cash. Still has the room. Bennett's heart hammered against his ribs. You're sure it's her? Dark hair, early 30s, expensive taste, kept to herself. The clerk said she ordered room service twice. Caesar salad both times. That's her thing, right? You mentioned the salad. It was. Isabel ordered Caesar salad everywhere they went. Said it was the only dish most restaurants couldn't screw up. I'm sending you a photo the security camera caught in the lobby. It's grainy, but... Bennett's phone pinged. He opened the image. A woman in sunglasses and a scarf, face partially obscured, but the posture, the way she carried herself. It could be Isabel. Get eyes on that room, Bennett ordered. Don't approach. Just confirm she's there. Already on it. I've got a guy watching the hotel now. Bennett hung up and immediately called Danny. We found her. Atlantic City. Get 3 cars and 8 men. We're bringing her home. Boss, is this smart? What if it's a... I don't care if it's a trap. We're 48 hours from losing everything. If there's even a chance she's there, we're taking it. They left within the hour. 3 black SUVs carrying Bennett's most loyal men and nearly every dollar of liquid cash he had left. Garrett had demanded another $20,000 up front for the Atlantic City operation. The crew needed payment to stay motivated. Gas, tolls, hotel rooms if they had to stake out overnight. All of it bleeding money he couldn't afford to lose. The drive took 90 minutes through traffic. Bennett's mind raced the entire way, rehearsing what he'd say when he saw her. How he'd convince her to come back. How he'd promise things would be different. They pulled up to the Ocean View Grand at 2:37 p.m. Garrett was waiting in the lobby, looking uncomfortable. She's not in the room, he said immediately. What do you mean she's not? She checked out an hour ago. Left this at the front desk. Garrett handed Bennett an envelope with his name written in Isabel's elegant handwriting. Bennett tore it open. Inside was a single piece of paper with 3 words. Checkmate. Empty-handed. And a receipt. For the hotel room. For Garrett's services. For the private security company Garrett worked for. All paid by Isabel. 3 weeks ago. Bennett's blood turned to ice as the truth hit him. Garrett wasn't working for him. He'd been working for Isabel the entire time. She'd hired him to feed Bennett false information, to drain his remaining cash reserves on a wild goose chase. You son of a... Bennett lunged for Garrett, but Danny caught his arm. Boss, we got bigger problems. I just got a call from Polly. While we were driving down here, the Russos hit our main warehouse in Newark. Took everything. They knew we'd be gone. Of course they knew, because Isabel had orchestrated this entire play. She dangled bait she knew Bennett couldn't ignore, pulled him and his remaining muscle 90 miles away, and left his territory completely exposed. Bennett looked at his phone. A text from an unknown number. You just spent $47,000 chasing a ghost. That's $47,000 you won't have to pay your crew. How many more will defect to the Russos by tomorrow? My guess is all of them. Another text, seconds later. Oh, and Bennett? I was never in Atlantic City. I'm somewhere much closer. Close enough to watch you destroy yourself. Bennett stood in the lobby of a hotel his wife had weaponized against him, surrounded by men whose loyalty was measured in dollars he no longer had, and felt the last piece of his power crumble to dust. Isabel hadn't just stolen his money. She'd made him spend what little remained chasing shadows while his empire burned. Behind him, he heard one of his men on the phone, voice low. Yeah. Tell the Russos I'm interested in discussing terms. The defections were starting. Bennett had $43,000 left to his name, a mansion he couldn't afford to maintain, and less than 36 hours before Isabel's deadline expired. He'd been outplayed at every turn by the woman he'd trained to be invisible. Now she was the only thing he could see, and she was always 3 moves ahead. Danny Rizzo had been Bennett's right hand for 12 years. Through wars with rival families, through federal investigations, through the building of an empire that stretched from Hoboken to Trenton. If Bennett trusted anyone, it was Danny, which made Friday morning's discovery feel like a knife between the ribs. Bennett had come downstairs at dawn to find Danny in his office, door closed, voice low on the phone. He'd stopped talking the moment Bennett opened the door, but not before Bennett heard 6 words that made his blood freeze. "Yes, Mrs. Cross. I understand completely." Danny looked up, face pale, phone still pressed to his ear. For 3 seconds, neither man moved. Then Danny hung up. "How long?" Bennett's voice was eerily calm. "Boss, let me explain. How long have you been talking to my wife?" Danny set the phone down carefully, like a man defusing a bomb. "She called me Tuesday night, after the Atlantic City thing. And you answered. She knew things, Bennett. Things only someone on the inside would know. She knew about the Kellerman murder. She knew I was the one who pulled the trigger. She knew about the body, the location, and the weapon I used." Danny's voice cracked. "She said she could give that information to the FBI, or she could forget it ever happened. My choice." Bennett felt something cold and vicious unfurl in his chest. Divide and conquer. Another lesson from his own playbook. Isolate the leader by turning his inner circle. Make them choose between loyalty and survival. So you chose survival. I chose not to spend the rest of my life in prison for a murder I committed on your orders. Danny stood, but kept his distance. "Bennett, I've been loyal to you for 12 years. But Isabel made me realize something. You're not the boss anymore. She is. She always was. And the smart money is betting on the person who actually runs the operation." "I run the operation." "No, you don't. You never did." Danny's voice hardened. "You gave orders. You made threats. You walked into rooms and scared people. But Isabel? She made the machine work. She knew every judge, every cop, every politician. She knew the account numbers, the shipment schedules, the weak points in every rival family's operation. Without her, you're just a guy with a gun and an attitude. And in this life, that gets you killed." Bennett took a step forward. Danny's hand moved instinctively toward his waistband, where Bennett knew he kept a Glock. "You pull that gun, and you're a dead man," Bennett said quietly. "Maybe, but you'd be dead too. And then what? The Russos take everything. Your empire dies with you. At least if you listen to what Isabel's offering, you might survive this." "What's she offering?" Danny pulled an envelope from his jacket and set it on the desk. "Immunity for me and 3 other capos. Full cooperation with the FBI in exchange for witness protection. She's already arranged it. We testify about the Kellerman murder and 5 other unsolved cases. You go to prison, we disappear, and the Cross family gets dismantled brick by brick." Bennett stared at the envelope like it was a live grenade. "And if I don't confess? Then we testify anyway. Isabel's already given the FBI enough evidence to build a case. The only question is whether you confess and get a deal, or fight it and spend the rest of your life in a supermax." Danny's voice softened. "Boss, she's giving you a way out. It's not a good way, but it's the only way that doesn't end with you dead in a ditch or dying alone in prison. This is what loyalty looks like now? Betraying me because my wife makes a better offer? No, Bennett. This is what survival looks like when the person who made you untouchable decides you don't deserve protection anymore." Danny moved toward the door, paused with his hand on the frame. "She told me to tell you something," she said. "Bennett built an empire on fear. I'm dismantling it with logic. Fear makes people loyal until something scarier comes along. Logic makes them realize they were backing the wrong horse all along." The door closed behind him with a soft click that sounded like a coffin lid. Bennett stood alone in his office, surrounded by the trappings of power that suddenly felt like museum pieces. Artifacts of an empire that had already fallen. He just hadn't been smart enough to notice. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. Always unknown now. "By now Danny's told you about our arrangement. 4 of your top men are cooperating with the FBI. You have 18 hours to decide if you want to join them or face them in court. Choose wisely, Bennett. Your deadline expires at noon tomorrow. After that, I stop negotiating and start destroying. Bennett looked at the envelope Danny had left. Inside would be details of Isabel's deal, terms of his surrender, the systematic dismantling of everything he'd built. Everything he'd thought he'd built. Because the truth was becoming impossible to ignore. He hadn't built anything. Isabel had. She'd constructed an empire and let him believe it was his. And now she was deconstructing it with the same methodical precision, exposing every foundation stone as something she'd laid in place. Divide and conquer. She'd turned his inner circle, made his most trusted men realize that loyalty to Bennett meant death, while loyalty to Isabel meant survival. Drop a comment if you've ever seen someone quietly control everything while someone else took credit. Bennett had spent 12 years thinking Danny was his man. Turned out, like everything else, Danny had only been on loan. And Isabel was calling in all her debts at once. The house felt hollow again. But this time, Bennett knew it wasn't the house that was empty. It was him, stripped of money, power, loyalty, and any illusion that he'd ever been in control. Isabel had left him with nothing but a choice between two kinds of cages, and 18 hours to decide which one would be his home for the rest of his life. The coordinates came at 10 a.m. Saturday. A text from Isabel with nothing but a location. Pier 47, Port Newark. And below it, if you want to see me one last time, come alone. You have 1 hour. Bennett knew it was probably a trap. Knew the smart play was to ignore it, maybe even run. But he was past smart plays. Past strategy. He needed to see her face. Needed to understand how the woman who'd shared his bed for 8 years could destroy him so completely. He drove himself, no crew, no backup. Just a Glock tucked in his waistband and the last shreds of his pride. Pier 47 was abandoned, and had been for years since the shipping company went bankrupt. Rusted containers stacked like a maze, the smell of salt and decay thick in the morning air. Bennett's footsteps echoed on the concrete as he walked toward the water's edge. Isabel was standing at the end of the pier, her back to him, dark hair moving in the wind. She wore a simple black coat, hands in her pockets, looking out at the gray expanse of water like she was admiring the view. Bennett's hand went to his gun. Turn around. She did, slowly, and the first thing that struck him was how different she looked. Not scared. Not guilty. Not even angry. She looked free. Lighter somehow, like she'd been carrying a weight for years and finally set it down. You came, she said softly. I wasn't sure you would. You knew I would. You know everything, apparently. Not everything, but enough. She took a step closer. Bennett's grip tightened on the gun, but she didn't seem afraid. Did you come to kill me, Bennett? Is that your solution? I came for the codes, for the money, for a way to fix this. Isabel smiled, sad and knowing. There's nothing to fix. That's what I've been trying to tell you. The money is gone. Stop playing games. Just give me the passwords, the biometric access, whatever you need to unlock. You're not listening. Her voice remained calm, almost gentle. I didn't just lock the accounts, Bennett. I deleted the encryption keys. Permanently. 3 days ago. The money is still there, sitting in offshore accounts. $217 million. But without the keys, it's completely inaccessible. To you. To me. To anyone. Bennett felt the ground shift beneath him. You're lying. I'm not. I wiped the authentication servers. Destroyed the backup drives. The money exists, but it's locked in a digital vault that can never be opened. It'll sit there forever, untouchable. Frozen in time like a monument to everything you threw away. That's insane. That's our money. Your money. It was never our money, Bennett. It was blood money. Money stolen from people who couldn't fight back. Money earned by threatening families, corrupting justice, destroying lives. I helped you build that fortune, and I'm making sure it can never be used again. By anyone. Bennett pulled the gun, aimed it directly at her chest. His hand was shaking. "I could kill you right now. Right here. Dump your body in the river and walk away." Yes, you could. Isabel didn't even flinch. But then what? The money is still gone. Danny and the others are still cooperating with the FBI. The Russos still own your territory. Killing me doesn't change any of that. It just makes you a murderer without an empire instead of a mobster without one. You took everything from me. No, Bennett. I stopped enabling you. There's a difference. She took another step closer, close enough now that the gun barrel was inches from her sternum. For 8 years, I made excuses for you. I told myself you were a good man in a bad business, that you protected the neighborhood, that you had honor. But you didn't. You were just a narcissist with a gun who happened to marry someone smart enough to make you seem more dangerous than you actually were. Shut up. The truth is, without me, you're nothing. You never learned the business because I always handled the details. You never built real loyalty because I managed all the relationships. You never had to be smart because I was smart for you. And now that I'm gone, everyone can see you for what you really are. A thug. Brutal, yes. Scary, maybe. But ultimately replaceable. Bennett's finger tightened on the trigger. One squeeze. That's all it would take. Do it, Isabel whispered. Pull the trigger. Prove to both of us that violence is all you have left. That I was right to walk away. That you never deserved the empire I built for you. Bennett stood there, gun raised, staring into the eyes of the woman who'd systematically destroyed his life, and realized that even now, even here, she was still 3 moves ahead. If he killed her, he proved her right. Proved he was nothing but violence without strategy. If he didn't kill her, he proved he was weak. She'd engineered a scenario where both choices were losses. Bennett lowered the gun. Isabel's expression softened, just slightly. There's a car waiting for you 3 blocks south. Keys in the ignition. It'll take you to the Canadian border. You have maybe 6 hours before the FBI figures out where you are. Run, Bennett. Disappear. Start over somewhere far away from here. And if I don't? Then at noon, I make a phone call, and federal agents arrest you for the Kellerman murder plus 14 other felonies. You'll die in prison. Alone. Forgotten. She paused. Or you can run, and at least keep your freedom. You'd let me go? Just like that. I don't want you dead, Bennett. I never did. I just wanted you to understand what it feels like to lose everything you took for granted. She turned back toward the water. Now go, before I change my mind about being merciful. Bennett stood there for another moment, then turned and walked away. Behind him, he heard Isabel's voice, soft and final. Goodbye, Bennett. I hope whoever you become next is better than who you were with me. He didn't look back, because if he did, he knew he'd see the truth written on her face. She'd won, completely and absolutely, and there was nothing left to do but run. Bennett made it 2 blocks before he heard the sirens. They came from every direction at once. Federal vehicles with lights blazing, tires screeching as they boxed him in on the empty industrial street. 12 agents poured out with guns drawn, shouting commands that blurred together into white noise. He could have reached for his gun. Could have gone out in a blaze of gunfire like the old bosses did in the stories. But his hand didn't move. It just hung at his side, heavy and useless. Bennett Cross, you're under arrest for the murder of Marcus Kellerman and conspiracy to commit racketeering, money laundering, and the rest of the charges faded into background noise. Bennett's eyes scanned the scene as they cuffed him, and he saw her, Isabel, standing across the street in the small crowd that had gathered to watch. She wore sunglasses and a baseball cap, anonymous in the morning light. But he'd know that posture anywhere, the way she stood with her weight slightly on one hip, arms crossed, watching with the clinical detachment of someone observing an experiment's results. Their eyes met for just a moment. She didn't smile, didn't gloat. She simply nodded once, a small acknowledgement that could have meant anything. Goodbye. I told you so. This is what you made me become. Then she turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd like smoke. An FBI agent pushed Bennett's head down as they loaded him into the back of a cruiser. Through the window, he watched the crowd disperse, watched the spot where Isabel had been standing become empty pavement. She was gone. Really gone this time. Not just physically absent, but erased. He'd never find her now. The FBI would seize his assets, what little remained. The Russos would claim his territory. His crew would scatter. And Isabel would vanish into whatever new life she'd built for herself while systematically destroying his. The agent in the passenger seat turned back to look at him. "We got a solid case, Cross. 4 of your capos already flipped. Danny Rizzo gave us everything, the Kellerman murder, the bribes, the offshore accounts. Your wife made sure we had enough evidence to put you away for life." "Ex-wife," Bennett said quietly. He didn't know why that distinction mattered, but it did. "Not technically. You're still married. But I doubt she'll be visiting you in prison." The agent paused. "You know, we've been investigating the Cross family for 6 years. Could never make anything stick. Witnesses disappeared. Evidence vanished. Judges threw out cases. Then 3 weeks ago we get an anonymous tip with a complete breakdown of your operation. Bank accounts, shell companies, political connections, everything. Gift-wrapped with documentation we'd need years to compile." Bennett closed his eyes. 3 weeks. Isabel had been planning this for at least 3 weeks. Maybe longer. While he'd been sleeping next to her. While she'd been serving him coffee and managing his calendar and smiling at his associates. She'd been building the cage that would hold him for the rest of his life. "She's something else, your wife," the agent continued. "We tried to track her down to offer witness protection, but she disappeared. No phone records. No credit card usage. No paper trail at all. It's like she never existed. That's because she'd been a ghost all along." Bennett just hadn't realized it. She'd moved through his world without leaving fingerprints, managing his empire while remaining invisible in every record, every photograph, every piece of evidence. The perfect position for someone planning to dismantle everything from the inside. The drive to the federal courthouse took 40 minutes. By the time they arrived, news vans had already gathered. Bennett Cross, the feared Mafia boss of New Jersey, being led in handcuffs up courthouse steps. The image would be on every news channel by evening. His lawyer, a public defender since his accounts were frozen and his private attorneys had all dropped him, met him in holding. The young kid looked fresh out of law school, clearly overwhelmed by the scope of the charges. "Mr. Cross, I'm going to be honest with you. The evidence against you is overwhelming. For cooperating witnesses, financial records, recorded conversations. Your best option is to take a plea deal, probably looking at 25 to 30 years. 25 to 30 years. Bennett would be 70 when he got out if he lived that long. Most men didn't survive that kind of time. There's one other thing," the lawyer said, pulling out a document. "This arrived this morning. Divorce papers, already signed by your wife. She's requesting nothing, no alimony, no assets, no claims to anything. She just wants the marriage dissolved." Bennett looked at the papers. Isabel's signature at the bottom, elegant and final. Dissolving 8 years like they'd never happened. He signed without reading the rest. What was the point? She was already gone and he was already buried. That night, alone in a federal holding cell, Bennett thought about 21 missed calls. About a woman who'd called and called and called, giving him chance after chance to choose differently. To come home. To prove she mattered more than whatever was between Taryn's legs. He'd ignored every single one. And in the silence that followed, Isabel had transformed from an invisible wife into an unstoppable force. She'd proven that you didn't need to be loud to be powerful. Didn't need to threaten to be dangerous. Didn't need to be seen to control everything. The silence of a strategist, it turned out, was louder than the roar of any boss. Bennett had spent his life making noise, shouting orders, making threats, demanding respect through fear. Isabel had spent hers moving quietly, building systems, creating dependencies, making herself indispensable while remaining invisible. When she finally spoke, through her actions rather than words, the sound was deafening. Somewhere out there, Isabel Cross was living a new life. A free life. A life without the weight of a man who'd taken her for granted. She'd probably changed her name again, changed her appearance, slipped into a new identity as easily as changing clothes. Bennett would never find her. The FBI would never find her. She'd become what she'd always been, a ghost. But this time by choice. And Bennett? He'd become exactly what Isabel had always seen him as. A man who'd built nothing, controlled nothing, and deserved nothing. Just violence and arrogance wrapped in an expensive suit. If you believe loyalty and respect should go both ways in every relationship, hit subscribe. Only people like Bennett won't. The cell door clanged shut with a finality that echoed through the empty corridor. Bennett laid down on the thin mattress and stared at the ceiling, counting the years he'd lost because he'd been too arrogant to appreciate the woman who'd made him a king. 21 missed calls. That's all it had taken to topple an empire. Isabel had tried to warn him. She'd reached out 21 times, giving him every opportunity to choose her over his mistress. His ego, his destructive pride. He'd chosen wrong. And now he'd spend the rest of his life in a 6x8 cell, haunted by the ghost of a woman who'd been there all along, holding everything together with invisible threads. Bennett Cross had learned the hardest lesson of his life. Power without respect is just noise. And noise, no matter how loud, eventually fades to silence. Real power? Real power was knowing when to be quiet and when to strike. Isabel had mastered both. And Bennett had never seen her coming until it was far too late.